I was a golfer, and I really I'd never been in any kind of a situation like that, and I didn't know where to go.
And if I had the time, I'd be right back there every day now and watching them.
I really wanted to live in this sort of, with all this attention, and it did knock the stuffing out of me to a large degree.
With that chemistry, you have tremendous confidence on winning the match, and that makes you more confident, more relaxed.
How in the hell did he get in the Masters?
He's just too good. That's what Jack Nicklaus said about Gary Player. But here's the problem. Player was 5'7", the smallest guy on tour, the son of a miner from South Africa, and everyone told him he'd never make it. He was too small, too far from home, too obsessed with things that didn't matter. Weight training? They laughed at him, said it would ruin his swing. Traveling the world instead of staying in America? They called it a waste of time. But Gary Player didn't just prove them wrong, he became impossible to stop. 9 major championships, 159 wins worldwide, and a career that lasted longer than almost anyone in golf history. So what made this undersized kid become a force that nobody could beat? It starts with something his father told him. Player grew up in South Africa. His dad was a miner, and Gary was small, really small. 5'7" in a sport where size seemed to matter. But his father looked at him one day and said, "Size doesn't matter. It's about the guts you have." And Player believed it. He carried that belief everywhere he went, even when people doubted him, even when they laughed. Because early in his career, something happened that changed everything. Before he became famous, Player had a moment that defined his entire approach to golf. In 1955, he tried to qualify for the South African Open, and he failed. Most people would have gone home, maybe questioned if they were good enough, but not Player. He refused to leave the practice green. He stayed there until 10 o'clock that night, hitting ball after ball in frustration, teaching himself, correcting himself. That night revealed something critical about who Gary Player was. He didn't accept failure, he used it as fuel, and even though he was poor playing with used equipment, he never once doubted his destiny. That kind of certainty doesn't come from talent. It comes from something deeper, something unshakable. It was 1959. Player was 23 years old. He decided he was going to win the British Open. That's one of golf's biggest tournaments. He told people about his goal. And you know what happened? They laughed at him, called him an insolent young man. The club professional wouldn't even let him practice, because no golfer that young had won the Open since 1868, almost 100 years. But Player didn't care. He practiced anyway. He believed in himself so much that nothing could shake him. And then he won. At 23, he actually won the British Open. And when he returned the trophy the next year, officials noticed something strange. Player had his name engraved bigger than any previous winner. Way bigger. That wasn't an accident. That was Player telling the world this was only the beginning. There's another story about Player's self-belief that shows just how deep it ran. Ben Hogan, one of the greatest golfers ever, met Player early in his career, and Hogan told him something remarkable. He said, "Son, you're going to be a great player." Now, Hogan didn't say that to just anyone. He saw something in Player. But here's the thing. Player already believed it. He'd already decided he would be great. Hogan's words didn't create his confidence. They confirmed what Player already knew. And that's the difference between hoping you'll succeed and knowing you will. But winning once wasn't enough. Player wanted to be the best, and he knew he had a problem. He wasn't the longest hitter, he wasn't the biggest guy. So how was he going to compete with Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus? These were giants of the game. Palmer had power. Nicklaus had everything. And Player? He was the small guy from South Africa, but he had a plan. And that plan started in 1953 when he picked up weights. His older brother had served in World War II, and when he came back, he brought something with him. A belief in physical training, a belief that the body could be strengthened and shaped. Player watched his brother train, and he thought, why not me? Why can't a golfer be strong? So he started lifting weights, and immediately people told him he was making a mistake. Now you have to understand something. This was crazy back then. Golfers didn't lift weights. Everyone believed it would make you muscle-bound, that it would ruin your swing. Even Arnold Palmer and Jack Nicklaus told Player to stop. They said he was wasting his time, but Player studied his body. He realized something important. Chest exercises were bad for golf. Golf is a rotational sport, so he stopped working his chest. Instead, he focused on his arms, shoulders, and legs, the parts that actually helped his swing. And every single day, he could feel himself getting stronger. He believed that by age 30, he'd be hitting the ball almost as far as the long hitters. And he was right. This wasn't just about hitting the ball farther. It was about lasting longer. Palmer dominated golf for about 6 years at his peak. But Player, he stayed at championship level for 20 years. 20. And even in his late 70s, his swing looked almost the same as when he was young. At 85 years old, Player claimed he was working out with the same intensity as most 40-year-olds. That's insane. But that's who Gary Player was. He had rules. 10 of them. Rules for being an athlete. And he followed them every single day. First, make it part of you. Exercise had to be a habit, not something you did when you felt like it. Second, keep moving. Walk fast. Take the stairs. Third, develop both sides of your body. Golf creates imbalances, and those cause injuries. Fourth, focus on your hands and wrists. Grip strength matters. Fifth, work on your core. That's where power comes from. Sixth, fight being overweight. Push away from the table. Seventh, eat superfoods. Nuts, fruits, vegetables, olive oil. Eighth, get winded 10 minutes a day. Build your stamina. Ninth, be smart about weight training. Use it right. And 10th, get energy from young young people. Try new things, stay sharp. Player didn't just follow these rules, he lived them. He slept 9 to 10 hours every night. He avoided bread, bacon, high-fat foods, and milk. He believed obesity was the biggest danger facing people, more dangerous than disease or war. That sounds extreme, but for Player, this was serious. His body was his weapon, and he wasn't going to let it fail him. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Subscribe to the channel and drop a comment telling me which of Gary Player's 10 rules you think is the most important, because these rules didn't just make him physically strong, they made him mentally unbreakable. And that mental toughness, that's what truly made him impossible to stop. Player understood something most people miss. Your mind is everything, and if you let negativity in, you're done. He avoided pessimistic people like he avoided bacon. That's a direct quote. He said pessimism is like quicksand or a black hole. It pulls you down and you can't escape. So he curated his environment. He only surrounded himself with positive people, people who believed in winning, people who pushed him forward. But this wasn't blind optimism. Player knew there were obstacles. He knew golf was hard. He knew he'd face challenges, but he always looked for a way through. He said anyone can make a list of what's wrong with the world. Any idiot can complain. But champions, they think like champions every single day. They do mental conditioning. They feed themselves positivity and motivation. And that's what Player did. Before his 1965 US Open win, Player used visualization every morning. He called it brainwashing himself. He'd imagine winning so clearly, so perfectly, that by the time the tournament came, he believed it was inevitable. Not hoped. Believed. That's a huge difference. And here's the crazy part. Player didn't just accept adversity, he prayed for it. He wanted tough situations. He wanted pressure, because he knew that's where he'd prove he was better prepared than everyone else. While other golfers feared the final round of a major, Player welcomed it. He'd trained for it, visualized it, and he was ready. This mental preparation gave him something most golfers never had: absolute certainty. When other players stepped onto the first tee on Sunday, they hoped they'd play well. They hoped they'd make the right decisions. But Player knew. He'd already seen himself win. He'd already felt the weight of the trophy. He'd already experienced the victory in his mind. So when the real moment came, it felt familiar, like something he'd done before. That's the power of visualization. It removes doubt, and doubt is what kills most champions. Now you might think Player was always this calm, unshakable force, but that's not true. His father remembered times when Player would explode during practice. He'd get so frustrated he needed an outlet, and his father was the only one who could take it. Player would apologize later, saying he needed to let it out. This shows something important. Player's mental toughness wasn't natural. It was built. He learned to control his emotions, to channel his frustration into focus, and over time that became his armor. Nothing could shake him. But here's where Player's story gets even more incredible. He didn't just compete in America, he competed everywhere, and that made all the difference. Most golfers focused on the PGA Tour. They played in the United States. They stayed comfortable. But Player, he won 59 times on the South African Tour, 19 times on the Australian Tour, 24 times on the PGA Tour, and 159 times worldwide. That's not a typo. 159 wins across the entire planet. Why does this matter? Because Player was constantly traveling. He made 5 round trips of 8,000 miles every single year between South Africa and the United States. That's 40,000 miles. Every year, he dealt with jet lag, different climates, different courses, different everything. While American golfers rested at home, Player was grinding across continents. And when he showed up to a major championship, he was already battle-tested, already hardened. The major was just another tournament for him. But for everyone else, it was the biggest event of their year. That mental edge was massive. Think about what that travel meant. Player would finish a tournament in South Africa, then fly 8,000 miles to compete in America. His body was constantly adjusting. Different time zones, different weather, different food. Most people would break down, but Player saw it differently. Every flight made him tougher. Every adjustment made him more adaptable. By the time he reached a major championship, nothing could throw him off. He'd already dealt with worse, and that gave him confidence. Real confidence, the kind you can't fake. There's a famous story about Player's 1978 Masters win. He was 42 years old, and the American media had been calling him a fading star, said he was done. He hadn't won a major in 3 years, but Player shot a 64 in the final round. He birdied 7 of the last 10 holes. That's still the lowest final round ever shot by a Masters winner. And when he got to the press conference, he didn't just celebrate. He went after the critics. He said he'd been winning all over the world, that he'd won his last 3 tournaments the year before. And then he said something powerful. They do play golf in other places besides America. That moment captures everything about Gary Player. He refused to be defined by American standards. He refused to shrink himself to fit their expectations. He was a global champion, and he made sure everyone knew it. The frustration he felt was real, because while he was winning tournaments around the world, American media acted like he didn't exist. They only counted PGA Tour wins. They only cared about what happened in their backyard. But Player knew better. He understood that golf was a global game, and his record proved it. But his impact went beyond wins. Player faced things most golfers never had to deal with. Because he was from South Africa, he faced political scrutiny, death threats, serious pressure, but he used his platform for good. He convinced South Africa's Prime Minister to let Lee Elder compete in the 1969 South African PGA Championship. Elder was the first black man invited to the Masters, and Player made sure he could play in South Africa too. Then in in 1971, Player arranged for black spectators to attend the tournament. That took courage. Real courage. The kind that only comes from someone who's already unbreakable. And let's talk about the big three for a second. Arnold Palmer, Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player. These three dominated golf together, but each brought something different. Palmer had charisma, Nicklaus had power and precision, and Player, he had heart. Jack Nicklaus loved competing against Player. He said so himself. And Arnold Palmer said Player had a little extra ambition, a little extra desire. That extra desire made the difference, because when it came down to winning, Player found a way every time. Tony Jacklin, another great golfer, said it best. He said Player wasn't necessarily the best player, but he was the best competitor. That's the key. Being the best competitor means you win when it matters. You don't choke, you don't fold, you execute. And Player did that better than almost anyone in history. He completed the career Grand Slam at just 29 years old. That means he won all 4 major championships. And at the time, he was the youngest player ever to do it. Think about that. At an age when most golfers are still figuring things out, Player had already conquered everything. Even late in his life, the Player kept that competitive fire. He said his generation had something modern players didn't. And when asked what that was, he said, "When we were in a position to win, we won." Simple as that. No excuses, no second guessing, just results. Because Player had trained himself to be ready for those moments. The visualization, the fitness, the mental conditioning, all of it built toward one thing: winning when it mattered most. What made Player different was that he saw golf as more than just a game. It was a test of everything: physical strength, mental toughness, global endurance. And he refused to be weak in any area. He built himself into a complete competitor, someone who could handle anything the game threw at him. And that's why he lasted so long. That's why he won for decades. Because while other players relied on talent, Player relied on preparation. And preparation never fails. His legacy extends beyond his own achievements. Player changed how golfers thought about their bodies. Before him, fitness was almost taboo in golf. After him, it became essential. Tiger Woods brought fitness to a new level in the 1990s and 2000s, but Woods was walking a path Player had already cleared. Player proved that physical conditioning gave you an edge, that it extended your career, that it made you more consistent. And every modern golfer who lifts weights owes something to Gary Player. The fitness revolution Player started didn't happen overnight. It took decades for the golf world to fully embrace what he'd been preaching, but eventually they understood. They saw how much longer Player competed at a high level. They saw his consistency. They saw his power even as he aged. And slowly, one by one, golfers started following his example. They hit the gym, they watched their diet, they took care of their bodies, and the sport changed forever. What Gary Player proved is that greatness isn't about natural talent alone. It's about what you're willing to do when nobody's watching. It's about the weight room sessions when everyone tells you it's pointless. It's about traveling 40,000 miles a year when you could stay home. It's about visualizing victory so clearly that doubt can't creep in. And it's about turning adversity into fuel. Player was impossible to stop because he built himself to be impossible to stop. He didn't wait for greatness. He engineered it, piece by piece, day by day. And by the time the world realized what he was doing, it was too late. He'd already become a legend. 9 major championships, 159 wins, a career that spanned decades, and a legacy that changed golf forever. Because after Player, everyone understood that fitness mattered, that mental toughness could be trained, that adversity wasn't something to fear, it was something to embrace. Gary Player showed us that the smallest guy in the room can become the most dangerous, not because of what he was born with, but because of what he built. And that's a lesson that goes way beyond golf. If you want to see more stories about legends who refuse to be stopped, make sure you're subscribed, because the best is yet to come.